This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. When you feel like your best, fam, you can do anything. You can accomplish all those goals in your life, make sure your family's good, and even start, who knows, a mildly successful podcast. Sometimes life gets you bogged down. You might feel overwhelmed. You're not showing up every day the way that you want to. But working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you. Because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything that life throws at you. The benefits of therapy are endless. It's great to just check in with somebody who can give you some perspective on life. Make sure that you're meeting all the goals that you've set for yourself in life. So whether or not you've been in therapy, now could be the time to give BetterHelp a shot. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out their brief questionnaire. You get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Couldn't be easier. If you want an empowered life, therapy can get you there. So visit BetterHelp.com/madaboutmovies today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/madaboutmovies. Sing the word ready if you're ready.
You ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. All right, we ready, guys?
Ladies and gentlemen, make yourselves comfortable. I'm Kent Garrison.
I'm Brian Gill.
And I'm Richard Barden.
And this is Mad
About
Movies.
Da, 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 da. You sound insane. You realize that? Yeah. The whole world gone crazy. Seriously? It's showtime.
Mad About Movies is a 1 hour-long conversation concerning all things cinema. The first half of the show, we discuss movie news, movie rumors, and, of course, movie rumblings. And also, we talk about what is currently piquing our interest in Hollywood. Basically, we just have a fun old chat the first half of the show. For the second half of the show, we go over our chosen movie of the week. And we give you guys our review. As an added bonus, please stay tuned to the end of each episode for our weekly recommends, in which we suggest something that you guys need to check out as soon as you can. This week, Brian, we are focusing our efforts on what?
the 20th anniversary of Jurassic Park.
Dinosaurs and man, two species separated by 65 million years of evolution. How can we possibly have the slightest idea?
You feel that?
What to expect?
Yeah, 20. Wow, has it been 20 years? Honestly?
20 years, man. 20 years.
I didn't even think why they were releasing it in 3D. So I guess that makes sense.
Yep.
Cool. Well, yeah, I got a chance to check this one out in the theaters. Brian, you did too, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Richard?
Yep, I did.
No, I haven't. I've never seen Jurassic Park. What's it about?
Get out of here.
No, I've seen it.
about
a million
dolphins?
times.
Steven, get off the mic.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in 3D yet, though. So I can't speak to this
Well,
current
Brian and I are the
incarnation.
3D gurus. I mean, I know you're a 3D guru, Brian. So
That
we'll
is
have
will
fun
be on my
talking about that.
tombstone when I die.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll have fun talking about that and revisiting an old favorite. So yeah, look forward to that. But first, we want to start off with movie news, movie rumors, and movie rumblings. Anything you guys want to mention right off the top?
Yeah, I think we should. I guess we should probably get into the biggest news that came down the pipes this week, which was very unfortunate, but was the untimely death of Roger Ebert.
Yes, very unfortunate. And Brian, you want to go ahead and give us your thoughts?
Sure. I wrote a piece about this on my blog, but just to sum up, I feel like Roger Ebert is the reason why we're doing this podcast, and is the reason, at least for me, is the reason why I've spent the last decade writing movie reviews, and certainly the last 3 years of just writing movie reviews. I really believe that he is responsible for opening up my eyes to what a movie could be, and to the concept of criticism for pop culture stuff. I wrote in my blog that I probably started watching at the movies when I was 12 or 13, and to that point had really only engaged in critical thinking as it pertains to school or faith or life lessons, things like that. Had never really applied a critical eye or understood the importance of doing so to movies or music or sports or whatever else. And catching that show with Ebert and Gene Siskel as well really made me start to understand the value of film and what makes a film a good film, as opposed to a bad film. It was one of those moments where you're like, I saw this movie as a 13-year-old, I saw this movie and I didn't think it was good, but I don't necessarily know exactly why I feel that way. You know what I mean? And then you watch that show and it's like, oh, you start to hone in on the things that they mentioned, that they talked about, and just really open my eyes to what film can be. So he was a hero in a lot of ways for me, and I think for a lot of other people, maybe including you two as well.
Yeah, totally. Great thoughts there, Brian. I totally agree with you in the fact that, he's sort of the reason we're doing this podcast. I think more subconsciously than anything is the reason we're doing it, because his way of criticizing films has become such a norm in the way every movie review should be. When Steve Jobs passed away a few years ago, I said to myself, the only other person left that has influenced me that much, there's two. One of them is Roger Ebert, and one of them is Steven Spielberg. Mm-hmm. And so when Roger Ebert passed away, it was just like devastating to me. Horrible, horrible news, obviously. But it was kind of incredible the way it all happened. If you saw his last blog post, he basically wrote out his last, what he wanted to be remembered by in his last blog post. His website has been completely redone. If you go to rogerebert.com, it's been completely redesigned, and it has easy access to all his past reviews. And somebody on YouTube, just a few months ago, actually, I went on YouTube and I was looking for old videos of reviews from movies like Alien and Blade Runner, and old movies that I hadn't seen, their review of, Siskel and Ebert. And somebody, luckily, had uploaded every single David Letterman, Roger Ebert, and Gene Siskel interview from about 1980 till about when Gene Siskel died.
Wow.
So you can go back and watch those, and it's just incredible to go year by year. They basically, talk about what their favorites and least favorites of the year are. And man, he just really hammered home the timeless power of cinema. Yeah. And not only that, but that your opinion matters, Totally. The guy, basically, it was his opinion on everything, but it was taken like, he showed that film has more qualities than just going to the movies and just something to get away and do something. This has artistic qualities to it. And, he really was a groundbreaker. Right. Definitely.
Well, and he's one of the first as well that, and I think there's a lot more now, but at least when he really got popular, he was, to my knowledge, he was the only one that was very popular that wrote from a fan, almost from a fan standpoint. Yeah. He wrote it, and he wrote his reviews. He loved movies, and he wrote his reviews in such a way that was accessible to a 12-year-old or a 30-year-old or whatever, just the average person, rather than right. I felt like as a kid, when I discovered Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, then after that I started looking at other people's reviews and was quickly turned away by most of them because they don't like the same movies that I did. And Ebert, for the vast majority of his career was almost an advocate for movies that regular people like. and I think that obviously that was a big part of his appeal. But I think that the critical community could take a page out of his book on that front, and it has gotten more and more that direction. But Ebert was definitely the trailblazer on that.
Richard?
Well, there's a lot to be said regarding his critical talents and his absolute enthusiasm for film, and that's all important and should be said. I'll try to focus on some slightly different aspects of him that I really admired. His strong humanist streak, his atmosphere and attitude of complete kindness, which is something to be really admired. He was always kind, and that's the first word you hear when anyone says what a kind human being he was, without a mean bone in his body, which is quite I would believe unique for someone whose job it is to be critical. I don't think enough time is being spent really on how influential that show is, that At the Movies show.
Yeah.
And that with the McLaughlin group, it's like those are kind of the first two shows people saw where people were just having a discussion. It wasn't a newscast. It wasn't anything fictional. This is a show that paved the way for shows like PTI and shows like The Sports Reporters and Around the Horn on the Sports Sphere, or, the myriad of entertainment panel shows, the Chelsea Latelys, and then the political shows as well. Obviously Meet the Press predates this quite a bit, but this is a show where really revolutionized the idea that two people talking and arguing could be interesting and is worth televising. That's an immensely influential show, not just on film, but on television in general. And that's a really important thing, a really important part of Roger Ebert's legacy. The last thing I'll say is, and it kind of goes on along with the first thing I'll say, is what well, actually I have one more thing to say. He's also a really important person in the age of new media. He is, I think, the largest.
Tweeted more than anyone, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, he was so active on Twitter and Facebook.
Well,
crazy.
Twitter was his voice the last decade of his life because he was not able to speak. And so because of those circumstances, he really adapted more. Roger Ebert at his core is a newspaper man. And in an industry completely dominated these days by those who refuse to conform or those who refuse to adapt, this is somebody who adapted, who had a website really early on, who posted all of his online, all of his reviews online, who had a web presence through social media. As a 65-year-old person had in an industry that refuses is now collapsing because of its refusal to adapt. He was someone that did, and that showed, I think, his lack of ego and his sort of spirit that came through all. And so that being said, I sent this to you guys, and I wrote something, and I normally wouldn't be so vainglorious to read it, but I'm going to because the thing Roger Ebert loved most in the world, other than film, was the written word. And so I'm going to read this little paragraph I wrote about how I feel about Roger Ebert as kind of a tribute to him, if you guys don't mind.
Yeah.
Criticism matters and survives because of its inherent deep love of subject. Roger Ebert was precisely the type of critic that understood this. Criticism, especially in the age of the internet, has become synonymous with deploring art and tearing it down, making room for the very term to criticize. But this should never be the case. The best criticism makes art better. Not just in the long term, but in the short as well. Roger Ebert, through his influence, charm, and wit, made movies better, and I argue, just as importantly, made people like us better too. Even in the rather silly form of this podcast, we are influenced by Roger Ebert, by the tradition of criticism and enthusiasm he carried nobly throughout his life and career, and we are much the better for it. Roger Ebert, 1942 through 2013, and what a life! It's a good sign. I don't want to be too mirthful here, but it is true. A good sign when you die at 70 years old, and everyone is saying he died so young. It was too soon. It means you lived a life that mattered to a lot of people, and that 70 years was not enough. I feel like if I croak tomorrow, people would be like, hey, he had a good run. 26.
Yeah.
Appropriate for Richard, 26 years, not a year too short, not a year too long. But for Roger Ebert, 70 years was not enough, and luckily we have all of his work to keep with us.
It's just so crazy to me that that his last writing, I mean, his last basically words to everyone was, "On this day of reflection, I say again, thank you for going on this journey with me. I'll see you at the movies."
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly, I mean, everything, you know. This guy, like, he means the world to a lot of people, and it's horrible, honestly. It hurts me to talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think, you know, I said Steve Jobs, but I don't think Steve Jobs even had as much influence on me as Roger Ebert, you know, in all honesty, about, like I said before, having an opinion, and the fact that that opinion can matter, and you can make a living off what you think and being yourself. You know what I mean? And he was always, Siskel and Ebert had such a great vibe. I think that's half of it was not only that they're having intellectual conversations about movies, it was that, you know, these personalities clashed, but you could tell that they loved each other like brothers, you know, that they it was like watching, you know, brothers fight, but it was just so classic, and
it was legitimate too. I think that's one of the things that always set At the Movies apart from the other debate and talking head type shows that have come after it. There was no bit involved. You know, if they were fighting, if they took opposite ends of the thumbs up or thumbs down, it was because both of them legitimately felt like this is a good movie or this is a bad movie, and here's why. And so the debate was always so real. And just like what you said, Kent, it did seem like two brothers because they were really going after it. It's what separates that show from something like ESPN's First Take, where just, you know, Skip Bayless is doing a bit with whatever opinion that he's taking. There was no bit involved. They were legit about what they were arguing, and it was fascinating to watch from the time I discovered it until Siskel died, and even to play off what Richard said a moment ago of how important that the show was, beyond just the type of programming that it spawned. For me personally, I almost always took my cue of who I listened to in the critical spectrum from that show. It was always Ebert, and then he added Roper after Siskel died, and I enjoyed Richard Roper for a while. And after Roper left and the show kind of bounced around, Ebert brought in a handful of critics like Christy Lemire and A.O. Scott, Robert Wolanski, all these various people, and kind of pointed the way as to who I should be listening to, either because I agree with them most of the time or because I so vehemently disagree that I need to, you know, voice that opinion as well. He really, him and his show set the standard on what good criticism was, from, you know, not just during its heyday with Siskel, but beyond, even when it wasn't quite drawing the viewership that it did before.
Right. Going on the dynamic that Siskel and Ebert had, it's just going back and watch. I encourage you to do it. Go back and watch those Letterman interviews, because I mean, it's almost as if Siskel was the voice of the critics. You know, this is what the movie critics should think, but Roger Ebert's voice was, this is what the fans think, and this is what you should think about it. Do you know what I mean? It was like you always got those two perspectives, and even on some of those movies, you know, it always seemed like Roger Ebert was giving his opinion casually. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it when you go back and watch him. Roger Ebert, like, Dave will ask, so how'd you like Braveheart? And, you know, Ebert will be like, oh, it was really fun. It was a really great, you know, great film. And then, you know, here Siskel would give his, you know, I thought for the budget and the way it was shot, and for Mel Gibson being a first-time director, you know, and giving it, you know, his opinion. So it was just a perfect dynamic, and it was horrible that, you know, they both ended in such a tragic way. Because I mean, they deserve the best, you know. Yeah. And Roger Ebert will be he'll go down as number one of all time. I don't think there's any question as far as movie critics, movie journalists goes. Out there is, like you said, Richard Roeper. He's pretty prominent. Leonard Maltin, I would say, is maybe the next biggest one out there. Who's the guy from the Today Show? Gene Shalit.
But Shalit and even Maltin to a degree they are kind of a bit at this point. They
are, but I'm saying they're like, as far as recognizable movie critics goes, maybe Peter Travers is getting up there.
Yeah.
For Rolling Stone, but he was more than movie critic. I mean, he was almost like people looked to him for advice on other things, on just life in general. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here's a guy, he knows about life. He knows about cinema. He knew what he was talking about. Here's a guy that saw over 300 films a year for over 50 years. So, I mean, I would have loved to sit down and just have a conversation with the guy.
Sure. Well, and like Richard said, he one of the best things about him was how kind and how gracious he was towards his audience. And I can't tell you how many having written movie reviews and whatnot for 3 years and being a part of that blogging community. I can't tell you how many people I saw over the last when this news came down over the last week that wrote about or tweeted about an encounter that they had with Ebert, either usually on online, but occasionally in person as well, and just how great he was to them, and how he over and over the recurring theme was Ebert just saying to these people, random people that that write movie reviews on the internet, either encouraging them of, man, your work is really good, keep it up, or if there's anything I can do to help you in your pursuit of writing career or knowledge of film or whatever, I'm happy to do it. And he meant it. There was a great article on Deadspin, of all places, written about Ebert and the way that he helped younger film critics, and it's an excellent read. But that was just a thing that kept popping up over and over and over again throughout this week, of just how he was an ambassador to, and he took that seriously, to the film critic, whether they were professional or, most especially, amateurs like myself and all three of us. So Richard, it really is a tough day. I mean,
yeah, totally. Richard, any more thoughts on Roger Ebert?
No, I'm all set. A great man. He'll be missed, and I'm very thankful that I got to live on the planet at the same time as him.
Yep,
absolutely, definitely. Well, yeah, Roger, we'll see you at the movies. That's for sure. You guys want to move on and talk about? Hey, man, fam, question for you. Do you own a small business, or are you a boss? Are you looking to hire awesome people, but you just can't find somebody to fill that role? Well, let me tell you about ZipRecruiter.com. With ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to 100-plus job sites, all with one click. In fact, over 80% of jobs posted on ZipRecruiter get a qualified candidate in just 24 hours. Find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by businesses of all sizes to find the most qualified job candidates with immediate results. That's why ZipRecruiter is different. Unlike other job sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on candidates finding you. It finds them. Right now, you can post your jobs for free on ZipRecruiter by going to ZipRecruiter.com/mad. That's ZipRecruiter.com/mad. One more time, try it for free. Go to ZipRecruiter.com/mad. Thanks to ZipRecruiter for supporting this episode of the Mad About Movies podcast. Jurassic Park?
Let's do it.
Hold on to your butts.
All major theme parks have problems.
But John, if the Pirates of the Caribbean breaks down, the pirates don't eat the tourists.
Man, let's talk about this just in general terms. What I'll talk about first. This movie, going back and thinking about it and revisiting this film is something that I do almost every year. And it never really gets old. I mean, this is such an incredible film for me. Influential. Talk about influential stuff. Influential movie for me. I don't even. It might be my favorite movie of all time, honestly.
All right.
Just Star Wars, A New Hope, and this. I mean, I could spend honestly the rest of my life arguing with myself about which one I like more. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's they're tied neck and neck. But man, this movie is so great in so many ways. Going back and seeing this on the big screen made me feel like a kid again, and it really needs to be seen on the big screen. I mean, I've been watching it for 20 years on the small screen, and it's great. But I mean, nothing quite like seeing it on the big screen. Richard, thoughts on Jurassic Park?
It's a movie that is neat because, we grew up with parents and older brothers and things like that, got to be around at Star Wars or Jaws or these sort of cultural landmarks. And I'm kind of that age where I was a kid with Jurassic Park. And I was similarly obsessed, like all my other comrades in my kindergarten and first grade and second, third grade classrooms about dinosaurs. And this was a movie that just really brought all that to life. I mean, it made our dreams come true. What would it be like to live with the dinosaurs? I still just assume that it's historically based and that the government, hid the story. But just such a it's Jaws. I mean, it's that level of a great blockbuster. It's every bit Steven Spielberg's greatest movie, along with more serious works. It's just a really masterful popcorn movie. It's, to me, the very definition of a blockbuster. It doesn't rely on movie stars hardly at all. I mean, who's the biggest name in it? I mean, Jeff Goldblum, or
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of this fun. It's a movie that they would demand to throw some sort of movie star in now, and the movie itself is kind of the star. It's signature in that way. It's a movie I will like with Ken. I mean, there's probably movies that I've learned to appreciate more as I grow older, but there's the movies that are more entertaining to me are scant and far between that I just enjoy on a purely visceral level. I love that movie, and unlike you, I've had the pleasure of seeing it again in the theater. I remember exactly what theater I saw it in as a kid and who I was with, and it was a seminal moment. So I'm excited to maybe have another experience like that now in my 20s. I'll be drunk this time, but it'll be I can't wait. Hopefully, I'm doing that this weekend.
I just wanna say, on one note, Richard, that you said it. As far as Spielberg's best movies, I really kind of agree with you there. It's going to be hard for me to say that it's better movie than, say, E.T. as far as a story goes, you know what I mean? And but I really feel like E.T.
I'm not the world's biggest E.T. fan, to be quite honest. So, I can see
why.
Yeah, no, I mean, E.T.'s, I'm sure, I appreciate it, I just don't enjoy it on the level that I enjoy this movie.
Yeah.
It's just exciting and funny, and it's one of the few that delivers on every possible level.
Yeah, I would say that for me, I would have to choose between Saving Private Ryan probably and Jurassic Park as being Spielberg's maybe best films.
And Indiana Jones 4.
That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist.
Jaws definitely has its moments for sure.
Sure, absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, Close Encounters too. I mean, those 5. I mean, those are just all masterpieces. So I mean, it's pointless to argue about which one's better. But I would definitely agree that this is his best work. I don't see possibly really how this movie could have been any better than it was.
More Sam Neill.
I mean, I like the casting. I mean, it just goes to show how great a film this is, that nobody had a career after this movie, really. Even, Jeff Goldblum, arguably, but Independence Day after that, I mean, his career is pretty much over. So, this movie is incredible, and I can't say that enough. So, Brian, please give us your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I'm with both of you guys. This is one of those... I work with kids in my real life, and I took a group of kids to see this movie because I felt like it was kind of what you said, Kid. I've got the movie. I've had the movie on DVD forever. It was one of the very first DVDs I ever bought, and I bought it on Blu-ray the day that it came out a couple of weeks ago. But it's a movie that it just begs to be seen on the big screen, and because it's just. I remember, just like Richard said, I came out and I thought of 5 movies from my childhood that I could absolutely remember exactly where I was, who I was with, what I felt while watching the movie, and so forth. And Jurassic Park was obviously on that list and was certainly number 1.
And also interestingly the only non-porn in that
right,
top
yeah.
5.
Yeah, my childhood was pretty rough. We don't need to get into that. No. But no, it was I remember seeing promos for Jurassic Park I was 10 when it came out. So probably when I was about 9, you started seeing promos. I read the book in advance of seeing the movie. And my parents took me to see it, and it was literally the most magical moment of my childhood. And I hearken back on that anytime I see a movie that makes me feel like a kid again, or makes me quote unquote remember the magic of movies. I think back to Jurassic Park and how that was almost a life altering experience, and it was just so cool to be able to experience that again 20 years later, and take some of these kids that I work with to see it as well, and let them have that experience for the first time. It's an incredible movie. It is certainly in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. And I'm with you guys. Obviously a movie like Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan has more traditional cinematic value, I guess, than Jurassic Park or Jaws or E.T. or one of those, or Raiders. But for what it is and for what it tried to accomplish, whichever one of y'all said it, you cannot do any better than Jurassic Park from a popcorn. Thanks, Kent. From a popcorn blockbuster level, it literally doesn't get any better than this. And it's just so cool. I don't really love the 3D bit, and we can talk about that in a second. I don't love 3D, but if there's one good thing about 3D, it's that we are getting some of these classic movies re-released again, so that people who didn't get to experience them back then can do that now, like I did this week. So
I gotta say, I think from every review I've read on this version of Jurassic Park, everyone has said that this is the best 3D conversion that's ever been done, and I don't know if I disagree with that. I thought it was gorgeous. A lot of it looked like it was meant to be in 3D. Well, if the cinematography is great, which obviously it was for Jurassic Park, and certain scenes like the Brontosaurus, where they're looking up at it, and just the working with depth there is just incredible. And I love the shots of the cars on the track; those look great in 3D, and there a lot of it. And when the raptor jumps, through the vent or whatever. Those gags work really almost as eerily well with 3D. Going back and watching this in the theater, you really notice stuff that you didn't notice before. Brian, was there anything that you really loved about this most recent screening that you didn't really you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I had forgotten, because I've watched it so many times. This was a movie that after it came out, this was one of the few movies that we actually bought on VHS, because we had so many movies that were just taped off of TV. But as soon as that one was available on VHS, we bought it. And for one summer, I don't remember how old I was now, but for one summer, my brother, who's 4 years younger than me, he watched it every single day. And so we watched it, to the point of where I went through about a 2 or 3 year period where I kind of hated the movie because I'd just seen it so many times. But because I have seen it so many times, I've forgotten about how great the jump out of your seat moments are within the movie, and it
how scary this movie is.
Yes, it is. It's I took all these kids to see it, and they're all like 6th to 8th grade, and As the opening scene rolled, I'd forgotten about the opening scene of this guy getting eaten by a raptor, and had to think to myself real quick of, crap, is this appropriate for kids to be at? Because I just couldn't. It had been a while since I had seen it in that context. But watching all the kids jump when the raptor comes out from behind Ellie, Laura Dern's character, in the shed. And just pops out.
Business,
yeah, they freaked out. Every single one of them just freaked out, and I got a kick out of that. But I've seen it so many times that you kind of forget how terrifying some of those scenes are, and how very well put together they are to where they to the point that they can be so horrifying, but not make you can't turn away. You can't get so scared that you have to turn away. You have to keep your eyes fixated on the screen, but it's just it's a terrifying sensation for anybody, especially if you haven't seen it before or haven't seen it in a long time. But yeah, the scene you mentioned, when they first get to the island and Dr. Grant and they see the first dinosaur and the score plays up, and
I don't think that moment can be understated enough as being a ground. You see that scene everywhere when people show just clips of Jurassic Park, but I don't think there's a bigger scene that had more influence on the cinema we're seeing today than maybe that scene. You know what I'm saying? At that moment, everything was possible in cinema. You know what I mean? Oh, well, we brought back dinosaurs from 50 million years ago. So now basically anything we think of, we can do it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
What were you going to say about it?
So well visually. I mean, it's just such a it is. You're exactly right. It is that scene is kind of an announcement to the world of, look, we're about to do something incredibly special here. And one of the things, this has been touched on by a lot of media outlets throughout this last week since the 3D version debuted, but this movie holds up incredibly well from a visual standpoint, from a special effects standpoint, and part of the reason is because Spielberg blended CGI better than any. This movie has the best blend of CGI and real shots than any movie ever, and it just goes together so perfectly. So everything holds up because they did anything that they could do with practical effects. They did, and so that shows through now because it's 20 years later. CGI from 20 years ago should not look good at this point, and it does. It looks perfect. It looks like it could have been made yesterday because, again, they did everything that they could to not rely on CGI, but to just use it in those moments when they couldn't do it otherwise. And then I'm sure spent billions and billions of dollars to get the best CGI that money can buy. But man, when the T-Rex shows up for the first time and breaks through the
just a second. I just want to talk about the premise of this movie. Going back and watching it multiple times, it never gets old. The setup of the movie, of Dr. Hammond going in recruiting, Laura Dern and Sam Neill, and him flying him to the island, and them coming off, and him telling him about the island, and like everything that's non-dinosaurish is incredible in the first. I mean, I was so engaged in this movie, especially seeing it in the theater again. Even at the moments like when they're at the dinner scene and Ian Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum's character, is talking about playing God and controlling genetics, and just the screenplay of this movie is so great. I don't think that gets said enough, but I really do think it is.
And it has great material to draw off of. I don't know if either of y'all have ever read the book, but I was a huge, as a child and as a teenager, as a huge Michael Crichton fan because of Jurassic Park and then the books that I read afterwards. I think Crichton gets kind of a bad rap because so many of his books were written basically like they were first drafts for a screenplay in a lot of ways. I mean, he wrote books to become movies rather than just write the book and see what happens with the movie, as far as that goes. And so he gets crap for that. But Jurassic Park is an incredibly well-written book, and the story is phenomenal. And you're very rarely going to see a book and a film adaptation, as far as the script, at least the script and a book that work so well hand in hand as Crichton's book and the script do.
Richard, are you a fan of Crichton's work?
Honestly, I'll be honest. I've never read him, but I've heard. I'm not a mystery and thriller guy at all, but I think people that are kind of plugged into that world he's greatly respected. I think especially now that he's no longer with us. I think his work now is being evaluated appropriately as something that was kind of slightly more evolved than what a lot of people were doing within that genre. I don't happen to read that genre, which is willfully ignorant on my behalf. I fully admit that, but I think his stock is certainly, I think, rising. Post mortem.
Totally. Let's talk, Brian and Richard, about the T-Rex sequence. First, one thing I want to say before that is this movie is so Steven Spielberg. I mean, only Steven Spielberg could have made this film. For examples like when they finally, 30 or 40 minutes into the film, when they finally get on the cars and start going into the actual park, the audience, you really feel like you're on that ride with them. You really feel like you're on an amusement ride. And when the first little exhibit that they stop at is the Dilophosaurus, the Dilophosaurus cage, and the cars stop, and you feel like you're in the car, and you're looking out and waiting for the dinosaur to come, but Steven Spielberg doesn't give you that. There's no dinosaur. It doesn't show up. And so you're left with that disappointment, just like the people in the film, like, we wanted to see that so bad. And just like the characters in the film, the first time you meet these dinosaurs is when there's a T-Rex in your face, It's done so effectively. Like, if you would have spoiled all you got really was a Brontosaurus, which he chose to. That's a Spielberg thing, choosing to introduce this technology really to the world with a Brontosaurus, and then he gives you a sick Triceratops,
right? And that's an incredible scene, by the way. Like that was a scene that I knew it was in there, but I'd forgotten. But just like what you're saying about how Spielberg is putting the audience into the shoes of the characters, that whole scene of them getting to touch and interact with the dinosaur for the first time is an incredible sequence that I'd forgotten about how good that scene is. It gets swallowed up because there's 30 other great shots and great sequences throughout the movie, but that one is definitely in that conversation for one of the better sequences of the movie.
Let's talk about the T-Rex sequence. So I just love the fact that you're on this ride with the people, and then Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler get out and they go toward this Triceratops, and you're thinking, get back to the car the whole time. You're kind of worried that they're breaking the rules and all this stuff, But it's just a movie. But so they get back to the car, and the car stops, and the hurricane comes, the perfectly timed hurricane. This movie is written so well. It's so believable. It's so unbelievable, but it's so believable at the same time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And Brian, talk about that scene, where we meet the T-Rex.
It's as a kid, it's just what I talked about earlier. Of you're kind of terrified, and you part of you wants to turn away, but you can't because it's so fascinating at the same time. The design of the T-Rex is incredible. That's something that I've seen mentioned around the internet this week, of just how incredibly well crafted the creature itself is. The way that they scale it next to, or in contrast to the Ford Explorers that they're riding in, is really cool. The way that the T-Rex interacts with the Explorers, with the cars, is something that I'd kind of forgotten about. He bumps it like a dog with a toy that he doesn't know what it is. Is fascinating. But when the T-Rex starts with the howling and whatnot, and the noise that emanates is bone shattering, and it's just such an incredible shot. The way it's pieced together is it's phenomenal. I mean, it really is. It is one of those scenes that I remember and think about on anytime I'm thinking about blockbuster movies, any kind of great shot or sequence. I compare the introduction of the T-Rex to anything else that I see that I consider to be good or great. And man, seeing it again for the first time in the theater in 20 years was just such a treat and such a cool thing to be reminded of how, gosh, just how great that movie is. If you're watching the movie now and you're not into it, and then that scene pops up, then it's like a jolt into, gosh, this is such a great movie.
Yeah, I particularly in that scene, I love. I mean, the iconic shot of them laying back in the Explorer and the T-Rex busting through the top of the Explorer and the piece of glass separating them from the T-Rex,
right?
Kind of like a bubble over them, you know.
Yep.
And that's just so genius. That was something that Spielberg thought of while he was thinking of the movie, just something that would look cool, you know. And so he had built these Ford Explorers with glass roofs just for that scene, and the way it works is so great. Just like the water ripple, you know, that was something that Spielberg had thought of just randomly. I mean, those little touches that are Spielberg are all over this film. And like I said, only he could have made this, you know.
Yep.
It's really reminiscent of Jaws, where you don't see Jaws for the first half of the film, you know. It's like you don't see the T-Rex here. And like you said, the special effects got so good. By the end of the film, the T-Rex technology had gotten so well crafted that Spielberg changed the ending at the last minute and decided, and the original ending was supposed to be they're fighting the raptors inside the museum, and basically the dinosaur bones fall off the wires and crush the raptors, and that's the end of the film. Kind of like, you know, their extinction kind of selected them, and they're to still be extinct. You know what I mean?
Right.
But Spielberg, they loved the T-Rex so much, they're like, we gotta have the T-Rex come back. Yeah. So they had to call IGN or ILM and say, hey, we want to have the T-Rex. Can we do it in this short amount of time? They're like, yeah, we know how to do it now. So, I mean, we wouldn't have even gotten the T-Rex at the end if it wasn't for CGI. And that's one of the most iconic shots, too, when the banner's falling down.
Right.
T-Rex gives his little King Kong roar, you know.
Right.
And I just want to say, before we wrap it up, unless you guys want to say anything else about the movie.
Did you mention the score and how incredible the score is?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Right. I wanted to mention John Williams' score. This is John Williams' best score besides Star Wars, maybe. And arguably Raiders has some moments, but this score is just so flawless. Every moment. Yeah. I mean, you can hum so many parts of it, and it's instantly recognizable. Like the score, I'm showing the Brontosaurus, that kind of soft. And you know, when the helicopter's flying in and it's giving you the fanfare. It just makes you feel
it gives you goosebumps.
It does every time. I don't think it'll ever get old. It's so good. But I just wanted to mention that this film is so groundbreaking, such a monumental film in Hollywood and everybody's lives that saw it. I mean, only other film I think maybe would be comparable is Star Wars. What other movies could you see like shaping people's lives?
Yeah, I mean, for me,
Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, to a degree. For me, it's Jurassic Park, it's Star Wars, and it's Jaws. We're three, because I to this day I am terrified of the ocean and really any water that isn't in my shower, because of Jaws. And I'm not exaggerating that, by the way. I don't swim, and I'm terrified because of Jaws. But no, Star Wars and Jurassic Park, there's nothing like, for me, there's nothing like that, and nothing else comes even close.
I mean, only one film that I'll mention that comes close. I mean, it's basically in the past 20 years, it's Jurassic Park or Avatar. You know, those are it for big what a blockbuster movie could and should be. Do you know what I mean?
Sex and the City. You know,
we can argue about that all day.
Right.
Guys.
Okay.
Alvin and the Chipmunks, the Squeakquel is pretty incredible.
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. And then
you're right, King. The difference between those two movies, and I'll just speak completely from personal experience. I walked out of Avatar and gave it an A+ and said this is one of the best movies I've ever seen, and was just completely blown away again by that magic of cinema type thing. Mm-hmm. And I saw it again 2 weeks later and thought, oh, this is not nearly as good as I thought it was. And it's still, it's a good movie, but I don't think it holds up. I don't think it held up a week after I saw it for the first time, let alone 3 or 4 years later. Whereas Jurassic Park, you know, this is probably the 50th time that I've watched the movie, and I'm still mesmerized by everything that's happening. Again, not to say that Avatar is a bad movie.
Jurassic Park is a great movie, and Avatar is a great theme ride.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's totally. I'm talking from two totally different perspectives. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Jurassic Park is that what you can do with practical effects, you know, and CGI. And Avatar is if you only have CGI, here's what you can do. Do you know what I mean? They're 20 years apart. I mean, almost. So, that's Avatar is the closest thing that has come out since Jurassic Park to a masterpiece of a science fiction epic. Do you know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Those two films stand alone. Do you know what I mean? Name one other movie in the past 20 years that I mean, arguably the Lord of the Rings trilogy is the only other thing.
Yeah, that's a different. Yeah, and I think you're right.
It's a totally different thing.
I think that's a different type of thing. I could put Inception in that category on some level, but again, I think that's kind of a different. I guess it's a different category, so maybe I can't put that in the same. But you know what I mean?
Think about all the movies in the '90s that came out trying to copycat Jurassic Park. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Godzilla. And even Peter
Jurassic
Jackson,
Park 3.
Peter Jackson even did a King Kong with dinosaurs. You know what I mean? And it didn't even come close. So I mean, this movie it could have come out yesterday and been an Oscar contender. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And just on its CGI alone. So this movie is amazing. I can't wait for the 3D version to come out on Blu-ray. I want to buy it. I want to watch it every day. I love this movie, and hopefully when Jurassic Park 4 comes out, which it is coming out, we can revisit it again and talk about maybe The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 too.
Definitely.
Anything else, guys, for Jurassic Park?
That's all
I got. Go see the movie. If you haven't seen it in 20 years, now's the time. Go see it again. Go see it in theaters. I mean,
a lot of people I talked to that are friends of mine hadn't even seen it at all. So a lot of people are seeing it for the first time. And
I had two friends that fell into that same boat, and I was just shocked. I can't believe that anybody our age.
I was jealous, honestly. I was like, I would love to see this movie in 3D for the first time at the age 20. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So good, so good. Okay, guys, let's move on to weekly recommends, shall we?
Sure.
Brian, weekly recommend.
Yeah, sure. I've been super swamped the last few weeks and haven't been able to get out too much, but and there hasn't been a lot of releases on new releases for as far as DVD and Blu-rays. But one movie that caught my eye, and I hope I'm not going to take too much flack for this, but is a movie that just came out on Blu-ray. Is one of my guilty pleasure / favorite movies, really of all time, and that is That Thing You Do. Have you guys ever seen this movie?
Oh yeah, talk about it.
Great movie.
Good. I'm glad you guys feel this way. I feel like more and more people are moving in my favor as far as this is a really good movie. But I know when I was younger, I kind of, if somebody asked me if I liked that, I would have to sheepishly admit, yes, I do, rather than, yeah, I love that movie. It's great.
No shame in that. Here's a little trivia for you, Brian.
Yeah.
That Thing You Do, Tony Kornheiser's all-time favorite movie.
Really?
So, yeah. So
that's
that adds
hilarious. Yeah. I would not have guessed that.
Legitimate.
One little bit more trivia, guys. That Thing You Do, the song, the actual song,
written by Fountains of Wayne.
Fountains of Wayne, who did Stacy's mom.
Wow. See, I'm learning new things every day. I'm glad I brought this up. This is good stuff. No, I hate musicals, and I don't know if you can really classify this as a straight musical or not, but it's definitely musically inclined. But it's a movie that I've probably seen a couple dozen times over the years. It's Tom Hanks's directorial debut. The music is perfect in that it's very catchy. You really get into it as it goes, and then it gets super old and annoying as it is supposed to. I think that's the exact purpose of the title song, is to get old, to symbolize what's happening on the screen with the band. It's very well acted. Steve Zahn and Tom Hanks is great in it in a smaller role. The reason I brought it up, again, it is coming. It just got released on Blu-ray last week. Number one, it has incredible cover art, and that is something that's a concept that I think is fading fast in the DVD Blu-ray world. It seems like more often than not, I buy a new Blu-ray and I look at the cover art and think this is garbage. This cover art's incredible, and number two, there is a super extended cut included on the Blu-ray that's like 45 minutes longer than the original. And I've never seen that cut before, and I love it. Yeah, it adds a lot.
I saw it for the first time, I think, on HBO.
Okay.
I had caught it, and it was like a different movie. I was like, how have I never seen this?
Yeah,
because I'd seen it literally 50 times or something, and I'd never seen some of those scenes.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a fun watch. If you've never seen it, it's 100% worth your time. And if you have seen it, now's the time to. I got it for like $9 on Amazon. So I mean, it's really cheap, and definitely worth purchasing. So
great recommend, man. I'm
glad you guys.
Underrated
That's
movie.
good. That makes me feel good.
That's an incredible movie. Go see it, or go rent it, or go buy it.
It's no Larry Crown, but I think justifiably it sits right at the foot of Larry Crown. As his, second best.
Tom Hanks too. Like that was one of the things that I took as I was watching it. It was just, gosh, I miss you, Tom. I wish you'd come back and do something worthwhile.
Well, he's playing Walt Disney, so that's exciting.
That's true. Yeah.
Are they gonna?
So many one-liners in That Thing You Do, guys.
Oh yeah.
So
Steve Zahn is a gem if you use him correctly.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally agree. A man in a really nice camper wants to put our song on the radio. Give me a pen. I'm signing. Yeah, good stuff. Great recommend. Richard, weekly recommend, sir.
Well, I'm going to stick with our theme of the week, and we talked about Roger Ebert earlier. I'm going to recommend his memoir, Life Itself. I read a lot of memoir, and it's one of my favorites. It's really eloquent. It brushes on his love of film and also his life and why he has such a love of film. And if you're familiar with his criticism, I think any fans of his criticism would want to read this book. It's a really beautiful, almost poetic memoir. Roger Ebert, something we didn't discuss, could have written about anything. He could have been an art critic or probably a short story writer or a journalist of any type. He could have written about the stock market and made it interesting and accessible. And he makes his life very accessible in this kind of true and very honest book. So I recommend it highly, and especially with these timely, memoirs. There's a great Christopher Hitchens line. Christopher Hitchens wrote a memoir a couple years ago before he passed away. He was actually writing it as he was dying of cancer, and he didn't know it. He was not undiagnosed. And they said, "You're 60 years old. Isn't this a little too soon to be writing a memoir?" And the Hitch said, "This is true. It may be, but it is better than writing it too late." And so it is. It's interesting to read about someone's life now, knowing that life no longer continues as we know it. So, Life Itself by Roger Ebert.
Great. I've been wanting to check that out, and I have no excuse at this point. So
yeah, same here.
Brian, have you read that?
I haven't. I've read one or two of his, I guess, anthologies of film reviews, but I've never read his memoir. And I'm with you. I thought this week I need to get out to the bookstore and try to pick one of those up because I really
they probably won't have it, Brian, but they will have Jules' book of poetry. So,
Guys,
well, that's just as good.
my hands are small.
I'm not kidding.
Okay.
Ken, I sent Brian this picture a
They're
couple
not
months
yours.
back.
They are mine. Okay.
I go to
That's my favorite
freaking
Jewel.
Barnes and Noble. Yeah, my hands, they are my. Oh man. But I go to the bookstore. I go to Barnes and Noble a couple months ago. I sent Brian a picture. I'm looking for a book on a Rimbaud book, right? Him and Verlaine's, the most two famous French poets. Verlaine's and Rimbaud. They were in love with each other. They toured France. These great romantic poems of French literature. Barnes & Noble does not carry them, the two greatest poems of arguably the 19th century and certainly in France. But what they do carry is 4 copies of Jules' poetry book, which has not been relevant since 1996 and is written by Jewel. So, thanks, America.
But here's the big question, Richard. Did they have Taboo's autobiography?
I don't know, but you do.
I do.
Greatest gift I've ever given anybody. Taboo from Black Eyed Peas biography.
Richard gave me that when Borders, to fill our listeners in, when Borders went out of business, Richard was working there, and he brought me a copy of Taboo from the Black Eyed Peas.
I bought it for 50
his
cents.
autobiography, and I just put it on my shelf at work and just watch as random people come into my office and then eventually gaze down at the book and just try to figure out what's happening, and it cracks me up every time.
Have you ever gotten any questions about it?
Oh yeah, 3 or 4 times somebody has, because I have the only thing I have in my office now are church books, Christian living and religion and world religions and things like that. Because I had to move all my sports books home, and then I just have Taboo's autobiography. And so people will inevitably, just kind of, you got a great selection of books here. See the Screw Tape Letters and some books on youth ministry and what is this? It makes for a good conversation starter.
What do you mean? What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How
Awesome.
dare you, sir?
So great
your
recommendation,
recommendation
Richard. Apple or
recommendation
Taboo's,
of the week.
Taboo's,
Yeah, Taboo's
That's your
biography,
recommendation. Taboo's
which is
autobiography.
best read in tandem with the Apple the App book of prose. Kent, what is your recommend of the week?
My recommend, I'm going to stay with the theme, too, guys, the film criticism theme, and I'm going to go with the documentary. I normally do documentaries, don't I? That's kind of my thing. But this is a documentary that I love that I've seen probably 4 or 5 times now. It's called The People versus George Lucas.
Oh, yeah.
Have you seen this, Brian?
I have. I watched it for the first time about 6 months ago.
This is if you love Star Wars, this is a great movie. Basically just dissing George Lucas a lot. And it talks about Star Wars culture, why it's such a big thing, why it's so influential. Talks about why the special editions shouldn't have happened. Talks about the prequels and everything pretty much in between. Really well done documentary. It's on Netflix. It's for free. It almost makes you think as if George Lucas saw this documentary and then decided to sell Star Wars to Disney.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it's just so well said about especially at the end when they're like, we want a new trilogy, but it'll only be good if George Lucas has nothing to do with it. It's basically the thesis. What'd you think about it, Brian?
I really liked it. I think the best thing about it was it really exposed the weird way that the weirdness that is George Lucas, in that he, more than any other filmmaker from his time, and certainly anybody who's ever been in charge of something, that a franchise that's that big, he understands the power of the fan and the value of merchandising and getting your product out there. And he was always so good about not only allowing but kind of encouraging fan takes on his movies and his material, and yet he can't make a good movie and can't understand why we don't like the movies that he's made. It's a weird. he's a weird guy, and he's difficult to understand on that front. And I really liked how the documentary brought that to light of how, you know, on so many levels, this guy is exactly who you want as your leader of a franchise that you love. But then he's also crazy and can't quite make a good movie to save his life. You know, it's very interesting. That's a good recommend. That's one that people should watch.
It's the Eddie Murphy rule, right? Where someone is successful because of their life experience, and they reach so much success that they're removed from that life experience, and then they're unable to maintain their success.
Sure,
right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Eddie Murphy is surrounded by people telling him, "That's funny, Eddie," like Norbit, you know.
Yeah,
and you need people to say that's not a good idea at all.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, and I don't think it was ever purposeful, and I don't think Lucas is a untalented, or I mean, this guy thought of Star Wars. He's certainly not untalented, but you know, this is a guy that I think is surrounded by people who revere him, and that's a hard way to be creative.
Well, one of the points that the film makes is that, and I had read this before, but he had a hard time getting some of his films greenlit in the first place, and part of the whole Star Wars experience for him was that the big benefit, beyond obviously making billions and billions and billions of dollars, was that no film studio was ever going to tell him no again. And it's a lofty goal to reach for, but the problem with that is the prequels. You know, if no one's ever going to be able to tell you, hey, this isn't a good idea, or this needs to be changed, or whatever, then you're not going to make quality products. That's a fact. Whether you're filmmaking or making an album or really anything, you need, just like what you said, Richard, you need people around you that are going to tell you the truth and force you to listen to them.
There's a great scene in it. I don't know what it's from, but it's kind of a behind-the-scenes look at when they were making The Phantom Menace. And there's a part where they screen the film for the very first time at George Lucas's headquarters or whatever, and George Lucas is sitting in there with the producers and everybody, and the lights come up, and the look on everybody's faces is just so priceless. George Lucas says, "Well, I think I might have gone overboard in a couple of places," and then it's just them talking about how they can't cut anything out because each scene is integral to the scene that's after it.
Yeah.
So if you remove one scene, you ruin the movie from a story standpoint. Oh. And the producer is just sitting there dead silent, just staring into space. But it's definitely a good documentary if you're a movie fan, a Star Wars fan, or just a lover of great documentaries. So I would definitely check it out. It's on Netflix, and you have no excuse at this point. People versus George Lucas. Check it out. Brian Gill, let me ask you this. Where can I find more of your work online?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at bgill12 and on my website, thesoapboxoffice.com, for movie reviews and other movie-related shenanigans.
Richard Barden, where can we find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at Richard Barden, or online at richardbarden.com, or in general, at your local strip club.
You can find me online at Kent Garrison. You can email the show at madaboutmoviespodcast@gmail.com. You can like us on Facebook. Leave us a comment on iTunes. Please do that. Please leave us a comment on iTunes. It can only make the show better. I think we've established that it can't get any worse. I think that's all we've got for you today. So until next time, we will see you at the cinema.
Bye. See ya.